Warning: the following program is a satirical look at Indigenous news, politics, and current events. Native Twitter is advised.
Bonjour and welcome to the Laughing Drum, television so deeply and profoundly Indigenous, we are First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, all rolled into one. I am your host, Tim Fontaine, back for another episode of whatever this show is supposed to be. And as always, I am here with the lovely and talented Red Power panel who are ready to take the week's hardest-hitting news and skin it like a muskrat. This week, the Red Power panel is a comic whose mustache is so Métis it has harvesting rights, Sasha Mark. The Ernest Munia, oh man. A comedian whose jokes are so powerful they can trigger seizures and reconciliation, Alyssa Blackwell kicks in. And the Ernest Munias of Elvis impersonators comic, Jerry the Big Bear Barrett. I'm all messed up today.
Me which.
All right, we're going to begin in provincial politics, where the United Conservative Party, with leader Jason Kenney, has been elected Premier of Alberta. That means that 6 of the country's 13 provinces and territories are now ruled by Conservative premiers. And if polls are to be believed, the Liberals and Conservatives are neck and neck when it comes to the upcoming federal election, which is only about 6 months away. So, Red Power panel, what does this all mean? Who wants to go first?
It means we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. It's a lose-lose situation either way, because we've lived under a Liberal government and look where that got us.
Yes.
We've also lived under a Conservative government and we're still pretty so.
Oh, well.
I say based on the way we dressed, we're all pretty conservative here, right? We're all wearing blue. We're all wearing,
Something's going on.
This is a full-on queer jacket, so speak for yourself.
It's certified.
I've got my gay gear on.
It's certified. And actually, before the show, we were talking about Sasha's jacket. There's a map. There's a map online that shows how all of the provinces now, the ones that are red, blue, or yellow.
And the current map.
And he's actually wearing that map.
I got
now.
a lot of blue for the Conservatives. I got some red right here for the Liberals. This much for the NDP, and this for all the white people in government.
I'm feeling very excited right now.
A lot of thought went into that.
No, it was by accident. But it's all for the accident Indigenous people.
It's welcoming the new overlord. All right, let's get back to the topic here. In Alberta, Kenney has focused a lot on bringing Indigenous folk into the oil and gas industry. That was one of the platforms. He was pledging $1 billion towards creating a new Crown corporation that will basically open the door for the oil and gas industry. But some have said that there is more to Indigenous communities than just drilling for oil. What are your thoughts on that? Is it a start, at least? An olive branch covered in oil.
That's exactly what you need. At some point, I think the Indigenous people will have to take advantage of the resources and start making money for ourselves to put back into our communities. At what cost, I don't know, but it's there. The Trans-Canada Pipeline, again, we may discuss that later on, but if we, as Indigenous people, buy the pipeline,
which some are trying to do.
And I think that's a great idea. Yeah. As long as as long as we can manage things and it turns out okay, I don't mind that. Yeah. But I think it's I don't think we can stand by any longer. We have to get a glove and get in the game.
Yeah. Alyssa, is this an olive branch that you would grab if it was offered to you?
I wouldn't grab that branch if it was a 10-foot pole, I'll tell you that. Especially not if it's being, handed to me by a Conservative. Yeah. Sorry. Not sorry.
There are Indigenous groups in that province. I mean, there's some chiefs that are saying that that Kenney is speaking a language that they like to hear, which is one of inclusion, and he's actually talking about...
One of money? Sorry, what was that?
That, yes.
That's what this
probably
is about,
that
right?
too, yeah.
It's not that they're saying, hey, we're actually going to take Indigenous rights very seriously.
They have said that. They have said that.
They have said that many, many years, and then we ended up in schools. So I have a very distrustful relationship with a Conservative government. So that olive branch, aka jobs, I don't know how much I believe that. Yeah.
Okay. You had touched on this earlier, that this with any government it might be business as usual. You know, what do you think life is going to be like if Canada again becomes Conservative, if a lot of the provinces are Conservative? What is anything going to be any different then?
I think just numbers are going to be thrown around differently. I think, with a Conservative government, a lot of the healthcare and education, we'll see a lot of loss there.
How much more can we lose, though?
In Manitoba, not a whole lot. I mean, we went to the emergency room a couple weeks ago and got into a room really quickly, but waited for 4 hours before we were seen by a doctor, and it turned out that it was because there was only one doctor working in the entire hospital. So we can't lose any more.
No, and the services for the Indigenous people in the North has to increase. I know that they're waiting for, I don't know if it's an MRI or more dialysis in Thompson, Manitoba, but apparently there's one, whatever this machine is, it's been bought and paid for, but it's not the shipping, and it's just kind of sitting in Winnipeg as near as I can tell. If we could move more medical technology into the North, I think that would be good, and of course education, housing, and just trying to fix the mold situation on a lot of First Nation communities. So again, I think we may have been forgotten about, again, because a lot of people don't realize how many people live in the North, how many people are actually affected by when the budget isn't extended to the North or were ignored, and this is causing a lot of problems in the North for our people. And I think whether you're PC or whether you're Liberal, people have to take this serious and show more compassion. There's a big word.
I think you really offended Alyssa. They're gone. So, I think you need to apologize.
We've had enough of this. Alyssa's just got a tickle in her throat. She's just stepped away for a minute there. But there's one thing I want to ask you guys. We've touched on this show a couple of times. If First Nations banded together, Inuit people, maybe not Inuit people, but Indigenous people as a whole banded together and created their own party, do you think that is enough to make some kind of an impact in this country? Are there enough voters? Are there enough politically minded folks to make some kind of a difference?
Well, when you look at people who vote for the Conservative Party, those people are very anti-Indigenous, I would believe, for the most part, and you see that they're the majority. They have a huge pull in how politics are played. So I don't think, just on the basis how racist Canada can be, I don't know if Indigenous people going into government in that kind of way is the most effective.
But I think
go.
Maybe now is the time to strike and get that political group going, because thanks to Justin Trudeau and his handling of certain affairs and certain MPs. Now is the time, because it's in the forefront and people are really conscious about what's happening with Indigenous, I want to say politicians, or politicians who are Indigenous, and how he's treating them and how he's treating women in politics. So maybe now that it's, a hot topic, maybe now's the time for whoever's going to lead this charge of an Indigenous political group should move.
Well, I'm going to move and call a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have more from the Laughing Drum and the Red Power panel. Don't go away. Now listen. And welcome back to the Laughing Drum. And television so utterly Indigenous, white people constantly tried to drill for oil and gas underneath our studio. And speaking of oil and gas, the federal government has delayed making a decision on the controversial Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project until June 18th. And if you remember, the $4.5 billion project will carry oil from Alberta to BC's coast. But many of the 100 or so communities in its path have had deep concerns about its environmental impacts, and many Indigenous people say the government's consultation process was flawed since it already decided the project was a go anyways. At least that's what they're saying. Red Power Panel, prediction time. Do you think that this is going to, what do you think the decision is going to be on the pipeline?
I think moving forward, I think that maybe if this is like a liberal decision, they would want to try to like steer away from it until after voting has been decided. Because if they do move forward with it, no one's going to vote for it. I feel like, well, there are people that, I don't know, but I do feel like they would also lose a lot of voters if they move forward in that kind of way too. But I don't know. Y'all go.
I think there's not enough consultation
Yes.
with the communities there, and some are saying that there is consultation, but it's not deep consultation. How deep do you go? Deep inside Justin Trudeau's pipeline. Tune in next week on APTN when we go. Anyway. Yeah, there's not deep consultation.
I mean, that's why they say they're delaying it. They're saying they want to make sure that they've consulted enough on this thing. But I mean, is that enough time for a project that size?
What
I mean,
does
it's been delayed
consultation mean, though, to the Liberal government, or to any government for that matter?
That's the question. I think that's what, I don't think anybody can agree what that means, because sometimes I think what critics will say is that the government makes a decision, this is what we want to do, and then they just run it by the people that it affects, and to them that's consultation.
But they're also saying that there's a clear conflict of interest with the Canadian government because they've already bought the pipeline.
Yes.
So now they're going to put it through anyway. So that's a big, they own it, so they're going to do it regardless of what the rights of the Indigenous people might be. But on the other hand, it is jobs, it is an economic boost to some communities, and it looks good until something goes horribly wrong with the pipeline.
Which
Yes.
it often does.
Yeah, exactly. You have
Oil
one
and coastlines are not usually
earthquakes,
Sasquatch, reconciliation quakes as well. Sasquatch, yes.
Sasquatch, he doesn't know. He thinks it's a toy. But anyway.
That's the biggest threat. There's signs all over. Beware of Sasquatch.
Exactly. So anyway, you've got a clear conflict of interest, and again, we said earlier that Indigenous groups should buy the pipeline.
Well, and we said earlier too, there's some that are talking about buying into pipelines.
Yep, control it, buy it, and then you can move at your own pace.
Yeah.
If it's not safe to go in 5 or 10 years to put a shovel in the ground, then wait some more. The oil's not going anywhere, well, unless there's another pipeline that goes south. Or Sasquatch starts his own oil company. But
what do you feel about First Nations ownership of a pipeline?
I mean, whoever owns the pipeline, it's a pipeline, right? It's
They could give it an Indigenous name, though.
They could give it a spirit name. Maybe. Bless it.
The peace pipeline.
Hold some ceremony around it, sprinkle some tobacco. Oh my God, it's so sacred now.
Well, people did predict it. The Indigenous people back in the day said beware the black snake coming through our territory, and by that they were referring to the black oil pipeline. But we do have a group called the Indian Resource Council,
yes.
And they are very serious about a proposal to buy the pipeline.
Yeah, and it's not just Western First Nations. There's First Nations even in Manitoba that are a part of that resource.
There's money
council.
to be made, Casinos are great, but it's not. That's not. The greatest out in the middle of on the side of a mountain somewhere in BC. If you can make money off the oil and control it, and control the safety of it, and like I say, consultation with our own people, I think that would be a good thing. But there are other people that, of course, it's grassroots, it's sacred land, and we have to treat it with respect. So I'm sitting on. I was going to say, I'm sitting on the fence.
Sitting right on the,
I'm actually sitting on the pipeline.
You're sitting on the pipeline, leaning back and forth. Let's say, by some whatever, the feds come out and defy expectations and say we're not going to move forward on this project. What do you think? Do you think that there's a potential backlash against Indigenous people for that decision? Because I think that's what they're going to say anyways,
There's
right?
always backlash towards Indigenous people, no matter what, whether it's a pipeline or whether it's, a peaceful protest, on Portage and Main. We always get the blame for everything, so I don't see what difference it's going to make.
It was
either way.
Aboriginal Day a couple of years ago, and I'm standing there watching the parade go by, and then some white woman looks at it and says, "What are those Indians protesting now?" Well, it's Aboriginal Day. We're not protesting anything. We're celebrating. We should hurry up.
Would this happen if 1970s Indigenous action hero Billy Jack was Prime Minister?
Oh, heck no.
No?
Canada would be fixed if he was Prime Minister.
He'd just be going around roundhouse kicking everybody for 4 years, 4 straight years. It would be incredible. We have the
Take a what?
My words are not working today. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to tear into our third and final topic of the night with the Red Power panel. Right. Please come back.
Please.
Did you know we got the social medias?
Don't lie.
It's true. Like the Laughing Drum on Facebook and follow us on Twitter right now.
Welcome back to the Laughing Drum. Television so explosively Indigenous. Ernest Munias sings songs about us, and he means it. I'm here with the Red Power panel, and we are about to get into our third topic of the night. On April 15th, the 607-year-old Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris sustained extensive damage in a fire believed to have been sparked by renovations which have been underway. People around the world were shocked and saddened by the fire, but many Indigenous people, at least online, weren't shedding any tears since they see it as a symbol of the Catholic Church, which, as we all know, was committer of atrocities against Indigenous people in residential schools. So people who, and the other thing that happened was that people who did comment on the church fire were accused of being insensitive or even hateful. Yeah. So, Red Power panel, what do you make of this?
I think it has ruined France's hottest tourist attraction. Get it? Am I now fired?
No, we're gonna get.
Is that a father joke?
We're going to be getting. Now the hate mail begins. What response though did you guys see? Like, because I within minutes of seeing this online, people were making jokes.
Yeah.
And people were just as quickly and sort of ferociously shutting those jokes down, saying, "Now is not the time."
Yeah.
So, what did you guys see?
My main concern, and I don't think people took this very seriously, but I do want to get a little bit serious today.
Oh, no.
Hold on. I feel like people didn't take it seriously when they couldn't find Quasimodo. And now we don't know where he is.
I hope it's okay.
I was actually going to ask about that joke because that was one of the first jokes that I saw. And the first one that everybody was like, "No, it's not the time for jokes."
Yeah.
Now is always the time for jokes.
Yeah.
The present is always the time for jokes, regardless of, whether it's a national monument crumbling down or a church catching on fire. Like, that's the perfect time for jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was hurt, right?
Exactly.
Like,
There's 3 people hurt.
Were they?
According to Wikipedia.
But they're not dead.
Zero died. Zero died.
Yeah. There were no deaths.
But Catholicism has hurt more Indigenous people than 3 people. So.
And that's some of the arguments that people are making online, right? And the other comparison that people make is that sacred sites for other people, particularly Indigenous people, are often destroyed, or often plowed over, or whatever.
Yeah,
and
they just
there
put a
is
pipeline
no
through it.
and there is no similar backlash. There's no similar feedback to that.
But I figured that if Jesus has been gone now for 2,000 years, was he not a carpenter? If this is not the time for him to come back and help them rebuild the church himself, I don't know when it's going to happen,
We
folks.
just had Easter. It's a song.
Do you think he'll just pass over it, though?
Folks, tune in next week. But here's the thing. You've got these billionaires, you got these Parisian billionaires.
Yes.
There's three main families there that are putting forth $200 million apiece, $150 million. If I was God and I looked down on Paris, France,
Yeah.
as a country, and I would say, how are the homeless doing? Are they fed? Do they have a roof over their head? Are they okay? How are the children? How are the single mothers? How are the underprivileged? Are they okay? Is there funding?
Sri Lanka?
No, there's no funding there for them at all. France, being one of the most popular countries to visit for tourists in the world, has a huge poverty problem, and they have. Now they've got these people that want to put $800 billion or whatever into rebuilding a church roof.
Yeah.
Very holy now, church roof.
Now what?
Get it? 'Cause it's really damaged.
But should it
I'm
not?
going to splice all of these comments together.
Should they not be like they want to rebuild it the way it was? Yes, a big pointing towards the heaven. Let's do that. Why not a sunroof? Yes, just pull it back. You can enjoy the sun rays from
It's
heaven
like that
itself.
stadium that has the.
Well, maybe why not? Those sunlights that create high electricity and stuff. Whatever they're called, sun panels.
Solar panels?
Solar panels, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they should do.
Okay.
It'd be a lot cheaper. Oh, we're going to build it the same way it was. Really? Why?
Okay. One of the arguments I heard online, and this was from some Indigenous people. There were a lot of Indigenous people that were.
Colonized?
Well, they were critical of the Commons, saying our ancestors would never do this. They wouldn't.
Our ancestors burned down a Catholic church, like a residential school. They did that. It happened. It's a real factual thing that happened in history.
In a couple of places, yeah, and cheered about it. So
They were very happy. It was a happy moment that happened for them because of all the death and destruction that the Catholic Church caused Indigenous folks. So, for people to, keep harping on this fairy tale storyline of us being like, we were these like stoic peacekeepers, all of us, all Indigenous people.
Oh, yeah.
We well, except for Jerry.
and me.
But we warred with other nations when, there was resistance. It was just we were outnumbered. So for us to say like, our ancestors, would not have laughed at that. No, they would laugh a lot.
On that hilarious note, it's all the heckin' time we have for this heckin' show. Thanks to the Red Power panel for coming on again and sharing your thoughts. Thanks to the crew
Our wisdom.
who always make this show happen every week. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you back here next week.